time to strap our boots on. This is a perfect day to die. Wipe the blood out of our eyes. In this life there's no surrender, and there's nothing left.
The Atlantic Wall, an engineering marvel, has been defeated by more than 160,000 American soldiers making a stand. The geographic location would give the Germans the high ground and the ability to smolder the American force, being able to sink a battleship from 14 miles away. The wall's destruction had a major impact on economic and social factors. The towns that supplied the Atlantic Wall were destroyed, and the Americans cut off the German force defending the wall from the rest of the German army. The Atlantic Wall was a three-tier system running almost 3,000 miles, with Hitler demanding 15,000 bunkers be built. This famous moment was referred to as Directive 40. Starting at port cities were the heaviest defenses, such as a 36mm triple-barrel naval gun, followed by military installations that were overseen by strongpoints, and lastly bunkers protected by camouflage nets. Most of the 15,000 bunkers were armed with a 4.7cm anti-tank gun, the PaK-40. The men had 2 to 3 months of practice shooting the PaK-40s. 1.2 million tons of steel was used to build the Atlantic Wall, enough to build 20,000 Tiger tanks. Along with the steel, the Germans used 17 million cubic meters of concrete, which cost nearly 3.7 billion Reichsmarks, enough to build the Yankee Stadium 1,100 times, equivalent to $206 billion today. Only 10% of the 260,000 workers building the Atlantic Wall were Germans. The rest were slaves or very poorly paid local men. In 1945, the people of France felt the abandoned defenses were an unpleasant symbol of the occupation and couldn't break them apart fast enough. The public tried to rebuild the coastline, then they started to preserve it.
Operation Overlord, which was a code name for the Battle of Normandy, was an attempt to claim France from German occupation on June 6, 1944. A combined Allied force of about 160,000 U.S., British, and Canadian forces invaded Normandy at 5 beaches that were under the Nazis' command. This invasion was under the commands of Dwight D. Eisenhower. During the invasion, the Allied troops encountered a German force with about 10,000 troops. The 5 beaches invaded were Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The first beach invaded was Utah Beach. This invasion was led by Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who was the U.S. Brigadier General. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 6, thousands of U.S. paratroopers dropped inland behind enemy lines. While dropping down, the wind currents were so high that they were not landing in the designated drop zones, and one was even hung from the church steeple for 2 hours before being captured. Those who landed, meanwhile, often found themselves outside of the drop zones. With quick thinking, they were able to improvise and succeed in seizing the 4 causeways that served as the beach's only exit points. The invasion of Omaha Beach was heavily defended and was one of the bloodiest invasions, with roughly 2,400 U.S. turning up dead, wounded, or missing. The invasion became so severe that U.S. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley considered abandoning the entire operation. But within an hour, the British had secured most of the beach's exit. At Juno, almost 50% of the Canadian forces had casualties, and even though they didn't quite meet their objective of taking the airports, they took several towns, so it was considered a success. For Sword Beach, Canadians dropped behind enemy lines to secure the invasion's eastern flank and destroying the bridges to make sure that the German reinforcements wouldn't arrive. The Allies would not be able to connect all 5 beaches until June 12th.
It's time to strap our boots on. This is a perfect day to die. Wipe the blood out of our eyes.
D-Day, a turning point for Allied troops, forcibly impacted the outcome of World War II. The attack on Normandy allowed the Allies to take a stand. changing the political ramifications for the Allied and Axis powers. The geographic importance of Normandy and its capture was imperative for the Allies' triumph. D-Day is used to refer to the day a secret military operation is set to begin. The term became widely used during World War II, most famously June 6, 1944. D-Day was the largest sea invasion at the time. The first troops to land in Nazi territory were in 6 gliders that could carry 30 men each. Their mission was to capture 2 bridges for the beach troops to cross. When the group arrived, they quickly took the bridges. However, when they signaled over the radio, no one responded. The group of disorganized paratroopers was only not defeated behind German lines because the Germans overestimated the Allied forces' numbers. The next day, 13,000 paratroopers flew out over the German territory. However, the troopers were very scattered and did not regroup their units. The groups paratrooping were the 101st Airborne Division, Screaming Eagles, and the 82nd Airborne, All-Americans. More than 130,000 men total stormed the beaches on D-Day. Within weeks, 1 million men have landed. The Allied invasion of Europe begins. The Allies free France on August 25th of 1944 and begin a chain of victories in German territory. The Allies deceived the Nazis into thinking they were landing at Pays de Calais, one of the possible invasion sites, by putting out inflatables of tanks and trucks. The Allies record countless hours of voices and moved the inflatables at night to fool Nazi reconnaissance. During the invasion, the acting commander Rommel of Normandy was on leave, causing added confusion on invasion day. In his commands, General Eisenhower stated, "The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men," said General Eisenhower. There were 23,400 American and British paratroopers that jumped the night of June 5th. About an hour after most of the paratroopers jumped, the 6th, 82nd, and 101st Airbornes jumped on either side of the main beaches. The Atlantic Wall was only about 28% complete. The beaches attacked were Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The forces going to invade the French coast included more than 3,000 ships to make up 75 convoys. The invasion, originally scheduled for June 5th, was postponed one day by General Eisenhower because of hurricane winds. Operation Overlord, the code name for the Allied invasion of Europe, was led by General Dwight David Eisenhower. The capture of Normandy allowed the Allies to battle their way to the Seine River and liberate Paris. To quote an article on History.com, the Normandy invasion began to turn the tides against the Nazis. The invasion also caused a psychological break of doubt in the enemy troops.
D-Day, a turning point in World War II, made a lasting impression on American history. The attack on Normandy allowed the Allies to take a stand, and because of this, the way this political war was fought changed. Normandy was turned into a geographic stronghold, and its capture was imperative to the success of the Allies.